Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second day of Loop. I'm really excited to welcome an artist who's been pushing boundaries in electronic music for more than 2 decades now and continues to do so. And I think that I just feel like you need no further introduction, really. Welcome, Goldie.
Hey. I've had some good nights in Berlin.
You've had some good nights in Berlin.
Bloody good nights. I've had a very thriving club scene over the years. You've probably got socks older than a lot of people in here, but it was some pretty hairy nights in here.
I think it's still something that is a very big part of life in Berlin, though, isn't it? I mean, actually, this is something I was thinking about asking you later, but I might even start off with it. Seeing as you mentioned it, was the thing about like the nightlife of a city being really important to it, and also being something that needs protecting and looking after. So I was reading the news this morning, and I noticed that the 696 form in London has actually now been
It's been abolished. Yeah, I got like 78 tweets or something. I'm like, that's unusual. What have I done now? And I've done something wrong. And it was just people tagging you in. I mean, we made big efforts, especially with the Fabric case and everything else. And I think when any young person loses their life, whether or not they've got to be dutiful towards going out and doing whatever they do. But I think that I had a great conversation with Doc Scott about this. Culture generally is very, very important. I mean, when we were wearing baseball caps, in the 80s, looking at New York and hip hop as a culture, we were looked down on and spat at. I was wearing a goose down jacket. I was like, well, look at this guy, he looks like an idiot. Now you can buy it online with your little brother, you know what I mean? Everyone's kind of, you can't remove culture from society. It's a very important.
Exactly.
I think the important thing I've always found, somewhere along the line, subconsciously as an artist, my subconscious chose not to be a tech. I couldn't do it. It was my disability with dyslexia and synesthesia and all these things that I thought were a curse became a gift because of what street culture had taught me. Working with different people in a crew, having an aspect of helping each other out. And it was only the last 5 years where, working with orchestration, for example, where you're learning to conduct an orchestra, which seems really weird. You're controlling a room full of people. You think, what's this guy doing? He's just waving his hands around. But you also realize that you're just gaining the respect of players, the wind section, the violas, and you're in 4/4, so you know where you're at with it. And I think, to be honest, everyone in this room could conduct if you teach them to conduct. Right. It's like a monkey, anyone can do it. But doing it with your own music, it's important to know that we've kind of managed to do that. With the likes of Timeless being 20 years old, 25 years next year. And I think culture has taught me everything that I know.
Yeah, and it is about the people, isn't it? And sort of networks and groups of people kind of working and growing together over time. I mean, I think for some people here who might not know, the thing that we were referring to, the 696 form, is it's the regulation on clubs in the UK, particularly in London, where it's basically, in order to put on a club night with a DJ and or an MC, you need to fulfill all these very, very strict security regulations, which just coincidentally really affect clubs that play grime, clubs that play hip hop, clubs that play techno, and clubs that play drum and bass, obviously. It's very obvious to a lot of people that is very weighted racially as well, that it can be used to shut down clubs that play black music, because if you don't fulfill this form, you could lose your license. And I know you were somebody who was very vocal about this, because for you, being able to be in a club, that has been so integral to your musical life. You wouldn't have got, that's how you started, right? Was being
it's the first samplers. It's the first sampler. Two people, watching DJs. Whether you're into Richie Horton, whether you're into Grooveyard or Randall, watching a DJ put two records together and put a record in the mix where the record becomes no longer yours and no longer the other artist's. I've sat on the floor and watched my friend where we just lose our minds because this record becomes something else, which creates the idea for you to run back and go into a studio and go, I want to make the thing because it sounded like that.
Yeah.
We used to be in clubs where we'd be in the bathroom and we'd hear a B line. There was a different B line to the record when you're standing in the room with it, because you're hearing the ghost of the sound.
Wow.
I mean, that's you know, we do that a lot. Try it in the bathroom. I dare you.
Yeah.
Follow that beeline. But it's important. I think it's very important for my. I always cite Mark and Digo from Reinforce. They taught me everything I know, and you know, being able to, in a very old school way, sit with an engineer vicariously through them creating your music was a big task for me. It was my way of implementing control, because I was always controlled by people in the care system. So I was kind of passively aggressive, trying to control a room, control the sound, keep an eye on arrangement. And I think there's also, we spoke about it upstairs, one of the most important gifts I think that anyone can be given is to be able to have a concept and see it through to the end as a storyline. I never looked at drum and bass as just a loop. This is going around here, we just put it into blocks and we just loop it along. I would always kind of put a concept together so I want to put these sounds in this loop. Sounds very aggressive. I want to place that here. I'll come back to that. I'm going to put this block here. I've got to get to it though. I've got to get to the dynamic of getting up to that shape. And I think some of it was in the drum and bass community, it was always first, second, third gear of having loops that just rolled over 64 bars. That can work on a club floor very well.
Yeah.
But for me, it was always about the concepts of the music. How far can we push this music? Does it have 5 gears? Does it have 6 gears? Can I just cruise into something that's just going to take it outside of the gravity, which is known as drum and bass music? I think as a concept, electronic music generally, whether it's Chicago footwork, drum and bass music itself, as in electronic music, the very foundation of it, coming out of the 90s, did to world music what graffiti did to the art world. Completely flipped it on its head.
Yeah.
And it's important to realize that this music which was bastardized and they said wouldn't last 2 years, 5 years, I still think it's that really bad uncle who just comes and swears at the table sometimes.
You mean drum and bass is the bad uncle?
Yeah, drum and bass is the bad
absolutely.
uncle.
It's still there.
You know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other beautiful electronic music. I think D&B was a good example because obviously I'm subjective with that, and it's a very subjective thing, but because I've come from that era. But it taught me everything about doing music at 140. It taught me everything about doing it, string arrangement. It taught me everything within the realm of that, which is important for me.
Yeah, and you were there as it was developing as a form, which I think is something that is really interesting to maybe, because I'm sure a lot of people here now are maybe in the slightly early stages of their work, like you were back then. Do you know what I mean? You're still at that point of like learning your craft or developing your craft or kind of getting further
everyone
with
has
it.
a sound.
And you think so finding your sound is like the first step.
Well, I always feel weird like when people, like Benny L just came and put this EP out, and it's a thing called Low Blow. It's a really big underground track, and it has been for a while. Randall says, you've got to get this track, it's an amazing track. And I said, the difference with that now is you just got to back it. I think the other tracks, I think Route Zero on that EP is an amazing track because it takes him away from what you'd normally do. And I think the trick with, especially when you guys probably all program yourselves, you probably all sit there on a laptop on your way home or going where you're going, you're all there, you have all these tools. And a lot of the time I always felt with a lot of people that engineer themselves and do all this stuff, they have a lot of unfinished projects.
Yeah.
This closure.
Yeah.
I play backgammon, I don't play chess because I'm shit at chess. I can't get you in checkmate. Try and chase you around the board. And I think compositions generally, I think the idea for me, especially in a studio environment, I'll work with a blackboard and I'll work with a board and I'll draw the piece out completely. I have the ideas. I still record on an iPhone. I was recording on Olympus before that. I still have 2 Zooms that I carry around with me. And it's always, with electronic music, it's always that initial idea. The very first idea I have, the motif, if I used to do this trick in the 90s where I'd sing a motif and I couldn't record it. And if I remembered it in the morning, I knew it was meant to be. This is a really weird way about going about life. But I remember the riff. And then I'd record the riff. And then I'd say, well, how many different instruments can I get to play this? How many different synths can I get to track along this? So I can give this illusion to this piece. But usually it's like jazz. It's the same piece. I'm just repeating it with this illusion by putting in other sounds.
Yeah.
Jazz was always great at that. Yeah. Charles Mingus is amazing at that. And by going through certain riffs and replaying them And if he's got 7 notes, just removing 4 of the notes and just placing the same notes, but a bit more spaced out.
Yeah.
And that's really always been a thing for me about arrangement. If you can arrange and have closure, then the last 32 bars will always be the beginning of the next project you're going to do. Not literally, but from an archetype point of view.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it's kind of setting something in place for the next piece. And I think because you kind of work in this slightly distanced way from the technology, like you say, you're not kind of hands-on the way that a lot of people are.
Well,
now, I think.
I've had an argument. I've had loads of little kind of where young kids go, "How can you do that? It doesn't even engineer. I don't need to engineer.
Right. Yeah.
What I need to do is to execute the complete concept." When we did Journeyman with James, he flew into Thailand. He'd already done some work with the EP. The album came out, and I said, "Whatever we do, these are the 16 ideas, all vocally recorded, the drums. So even down to the detail. For me, it would be." You know, I did a drum session 2 years ago with Adam Betts, John Blees, Hugh Wilkinson. And I decided to get every break I've ever experienced and replay it. And I went through the stages of 160, 120, 80. And let's replay that.
That's a really ambitious thing
Well,
to do.
you've got to be ambitious with it. Well, you have to be. You know, I kind of went, well, what was Odelay, Beck, for example, that album? Let me look at Pollution, for example. And I said to Bess that, you know, it's a gung-ka, gung-ka, gung-ka. And so what is it? I say it's gung-ka, gung-ka, gung-ka. So we just, every single thing about being able to vocalize in a studio is really important. But that's what Graf does, that's what B-boyism does. You just do the move, man. Just get in there and do it. Get your hands dirty. You can't sit there and go, have you come up with something? You know what I mean? You got to, and I think there's another great example. We put this other album is going to drop next year called Subjective. It's called Music for Inanimate Objects. I always wanted to explore Ryuichi Sakamoto with Eno, with Goldie as a character. Like this 127 BPM, what's that going to sound like? There's this interesting track on the, we're already into the second album, 6 tracks in. And it's just this beautiful string arrangement. And the vocal, I would often sit and just have a great looping sound. And how can I weave a melody throughout that? And I always got back to the same aspect of, if you're making music, a truthful idea will last in the honesty of time.
Right.
Just be truthful to what you really want to say with it. And the words come after. It's kind of like poetry. It just comes after. I think that it's very important to be able to put these shapes down and weave throughout them. And then take those shapes and go, well, I'm going to put this cello playing that same shape. I'm going to get the mid-violas playing that. And then I'm going to get a vocal to just cross all the way through it. I want to be able to see it. And being able to see the music. And also, especially with a legend, you know, you kind of, you draw a legend and you go bar 0, 0 to, let's say, 10 minutes. And that's the black line. And now, so I've gone this way, sorry for you guys. That's black line. And then I'm going to go, all my basses are going to be in blues and purples, the majority. And then I'm going to have tam-tams and the breaks running in greens. And then I have the strings in orange running here with these other yellow strings that are going to come off, which are the high violas. And then I'm going to use all the white noise in between that. With those sounds, when I lock them in certain loops on the 8 or the 16 or the 32, and I explore looping these things within Ableton or, you know, Logic, I'll then play around with those sounds and intercede with that and capture all of that stuff like fishing. We'll then go, where can we take all these sounds we've captured and then place them and sprinkle them across that arrangement? So I think that the idea of really being that kind of old school graffiti writer has really helped me along the way.
Yeah.
It's not everyone's technique, but I think some guys, I think the general feeling is that a lot of young people go, well, I'm kind of just looping stuff, you know, but sometimes you've got to keep the lid closed and just draw the ideas out. Think, well, I want to work with that. What are my favorite records? What do I like about that record? Yeah. And sometimes I'd ask a piano player, you know, Natalie Duncan's a great example. I said, what is it about that back end of that record that I like? She said, well, it's F sharp to G minor, that's why you like it. Okay, could you give me an example of that in a chord? And you go, okay, well, can you stay there? Just play that. And I think musicians, one of the weirdest things with musicians I find really interesting is when they're rehearsing and you're getting ready to record a session, they'll be playing away. I've got Matt Calvert playing these harmonics, and I love harmonics, guitar harmonics, where the notes just extend like the pedal on a piano. And he's playing away, and I'm like, can you play that again? He goes, play what again? Because they're so gifted. They're like, it's like what I think musicians are like watching flames. And my job as an alchemist, really, is to photograph time.
Right. To
My
kind of
job is to
freeze that
photograph,
moment.
and like Polaroids, I'm just arranging them how I want to hear them go down.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's so clear when you talk about music as well that you're thinking visually, because you're actually like mapping it out for us. And I think your sort of background with visual art, with graffiti, and now you do a lot of other visual art now as well, don't you? It's obviously got a massive influence, or the two things influence each other. Like, it's not like one is more important than the other. They kind of.
Well, people
feed
say to
into
me,
each other.
what you paint? And I'm like, well, I'm painting all the time. You know, I paint with sound. And I think Joseph Ryquart summed it up. In 1972, he said, you know, graffito will replace the art as we know it, like the Gainsborough painting, the carrying the feel. That's been replaced by letter form. And even now, it's been replaced by symbolism. You know, and I think that's why spray can art and poster art has replaced everything, because culturally, you try to with the culture, and they're going to find new ways. I mean, I'll give it 2 years before billboards are hacked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people are hacking with some really serious art. You know what I mean? Like, and just posting stuff, because you can't mess with culture like that. And I think that it's taught me so much. And I also think that I've always had this lucky experience with believing in something that no one else believes in so much that it just works for me. I've never had an unfinished piece of music. You know, I can look at early arrangements and I think like Hornet 127 is a good example. It just sounds like a simple little tune that goes along and it's nice. It's a young version of me. And there are, believe me, you know, when I made that difficult second album, Mother was not going to be listened to by any of you guys. I get it. But it's a dirty job, the artist, sometimes. This doesn't mean that making commercial music is a bad thing. You know, if you can make a great pop record, make it. Make money, please. You know, but culturally, for me, I just feel that within the arts, I just have to create a legacy of music that I can stand by and believe in. And if you take 4 bars out of it and get influenced by it, great. That's all that matters to me.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be a good time to hear a track from your new album in that case, because this year's been pretty.
It's been a mad year.
You've got
I wasn't going to make another record.
New album for how long now?
Well, it was the first album I made for 8 years in terms of like a studio album. But I think that Journeyman as a body of work, timeless will always be timeless. It's always going to be rose tinted. It will always be rose tinted because people grew up on it, and it was genre defining. I get that. But an artist always knows when he's done his best work. And for 16 tracks to go through such an archetype and have a lot of songwriting, a lot of arrangements, and we spoke about redemption. You know, it hadn't been done before, you know, turning a D&B record into a techno record. And actually going to the source, you know, going to Mad Mike from Underground Resistance and saying, I need to sample high-tech jazz because it was such a pivotal record. But I think Horizons was a great track.
Yeah, I mean, well, we could start with playing Horizons. I think that'd be a good one to start. This is the first track off the Journeyman, and this one you're working with Swindle, is that right?
Well, Swindle was very good at playing his P-Funk, and I kind of sang him. I sent him a really bad cat wailing idea. You know, people who get sent these vocals from me start laughing. They phone me up and they're in hysterics.
So you literally just send them like the vocal.
I send him this vocal, and it's always like slightly semitones.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, but we get it. I was running around the floor with laughter, and then they get it, and they come back, and it's 99.9% of where I want it to be now.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well let's have a listen to this. This is Horizons.
Nettie there. Just get to the peak there, right there. Going up now there. There we go, and then building to that point. And then you're there, right there. Right there, it's hot. It's going out now. Then you're on the way home. Then you're on the way home. Seriously.
Here comes the journeyman.
There you go. I just remembered. I remembered some of the bloody long records. Can't help it.
Yeah, I mean that's not the longest by any
Well,
means.
no, but I just, the general idea of having a great
quite like-
shape, and I think the environment in Thailand,
Yeah.
the beach every day, yoga every day, and just the shape of what New Horizons means, and that's what raconteuring is, and especially with electronic music, when people say, why can't electronic music tell stories? Why can't electronic music be as good as classical? Why is it always kind of just pigeonholed to, it's just the kids living to it? You can outline really well, and then add to that shape. And I think the breakthrough on that track for us was that there was this really sticky point of trying to get to the top of the mountain. And I just literally just doubled that other 60 to 64 bars because I needed to go up again for it to be able to make the going down like it was going to be going down.
You made a little diagram for me
Yeah,
while we were
sorry, yeah.
listening to it. I've got a little schematic of the ups and downs, but it
really
follows
works
that,
as creating a shape in music. It really works doing that. And I think Terry Walker's a great singer. She's done some great albums on her own. And she's Jamaican, and she's like, look, I don't understand it. I'm like, just believe in what I'm saying in the vocal and you'll get it.
When she says she doesn't understand it, what?
She didn't understand it because she's so used to singing one way.
Okay.
And I'm such a control freak when it comes to the voice is just as important as a bass line. It's got to be the instrument. And, you go all the way through the trail and it goes, I am what I am, what I am, what I am. Been through the valleys of the damned, here comes the journeyman. So it redeems itself in the very lyric of itself. And it's important for me that the content, it's unconventional songwriting for a start, but it has to fall between the black notes and the white notes. It has to have that shape. And what's great about that track is if you listen to the instrumental,
yeah,
you hear the finger clicks, you hear the layers between the onion skin. And I think just being a Virgo is generally that. I'm a bit really anal
Control
like
freak.
that. I'm just every single thing. Ghost in reverb is making sure that the reverb just tells out just enough. And I kind of look at also when I'm doing pieces like that. Kamasi Washington's album, if any of you are into jazz, called The Epic, he brought it out a couple of years ago. It's the first jazz album that blew my mind for a very long time
Yeah,
because
it's
I'm
an
so
amazing
old-fashioned.
record.
I'm so old-fashioned. I'm like, Pat Metheny, Still Live Talking, Charles Mingus. I'm very old-fashioned. I've got my ways. But that album, I'm like, this is great. He had this choir thing going on. I want a bit of that. And I think art's imitation, and the other great thing about it is that in terms of ticking that passive-aggressive box, me and Dillinger were in Austria. I went, Carl, so you listen, you see the album, man, it's fucking mind-blowing. I'm like, I just want to go and start making music again. I'm like, so you didn't get Horizons? What do you mean? I went, it's fluid. What do you mean it's fluid? It's fluid, your song. If any of you into old drum and bass music, there's a track called Fluid that he made. Get it up on YouTube and listen to the B line. He just goes bum bum ow 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 ow, and I went, right, I'm gonna get Swindle to play that riff and just replay it in another way. It's note for note. It's actually note for note, but different synths playing it.
Exactly, and that's what's so important with, I think, electronic sound. It's so much about more than the notes, isn't it? It's about that kind of texture and
The texture and the sound. And he was like, I can't believe you put it right in my face. You know what I mean? But that's what B-boys do. They come out and they just do this move. And they just do this move. How do you do that? What do you do? It's a double windmill. And I'm like, shit. And you got to go and learn the move. And I think archetypally, that's the archetype. Listen, we used to take people's stuff blatantly, man. So the man's phone, what's my sound for, man? Well, you got it from a record. You got it from De La Soul. Where did you get it from? So, art is imitation.
Yeah. And that kind of competitiveness, I think, was such a big part of
That
early
competitiveness
metalheads.
kind of drove people into doing different styles.
Yeah,
It drove
exactly.
people into having their sound, but it was V, And I think in a really weird way, drum and bass we're not Motown, right? But it became Motown for us. You look back in those record collections, like, wow, it's kind of it's been there for a while. Like Rudimental are influenced by their dad's record collection, which I kind of like that. It's kind of cool because it comes from the right place.
Well, it's also like the way that someone like Kamasi Washington he's a jazz musician. Jazz has been around for how long? But he's reinterpreting it.
His
He's doing his own
interpretation of
thing.
jazz.
And it's not like it's the way people were about grime. I think when grime first came along, it was just going to be this gimmick that just went. And grime
Well, I've got
is doing really
my
well.
concept. I have a concept for people to just get their heads around it and think, well, old Uncle Goldie there wheeled him into loop and he just told us his story. I remember the old days, the old Terminator, hey, tell ya. Hey, in Mannheim, jungle, I was there. It's great that we have this history. It really is. There's a point where I couldn't play in Germany because I was playing too dark. It was, because it became jungle. It's what it was, yeah. We've gone through all these branches and these great trees with drum and bass. But I'll give you a really good example that rave culture, with all these different castes, white, black, Blue Note, was all these different kids, skate kids, dreads, like hustlers, everyone. It wasn't about color, it was about this sound. And the sound of rave culture was this resonance, like, it's a resonance. That was the voice of England then. Because we didn't want to have full vocals, we just wanted to have this sound. We want to take you out with sound. So graffiti is powerful, but it's wild style, but you can't read it. Unless you know the style, you can't read it. And that's the trick. If you can read it, you're down. You can read, I mean? Like, I can read that, boy, I can read, oh wow, look what he's doing with that A. I mean, Germany's, especially Berlin, the writers, they're unbelievable. Unbelievable writers here. And seeing the way, you know, Mo2's always been one of my heroes, the way that he painted characters like no one else. That's style. And you know, you put that to the general population and they can't see it.
Yeah, it's like a code, isn't it?
It's a code.
It's a code, yeah.
And I think that I've always treated New York Graffiti as the first internet. You're sending a message on a train through a city and they can't read it, but I can read it on the other end. And I think drum and bass music had that resonance. So grime, you know, when we were looking at UK hip hop, we were in like tracksuits that were kind of nice and new and trying to do this rap thing that wasn't really working because the projects weren't the projects for us. It was kind of clean. But Paris, let's talk about Paris. They had ghettos, so they even had their own dialect with rap because it was getting that bad. So they adapted to hip hop a lot more than we did, and I think that's why grime now has this voice because it's this voice for the UK now, which has this voice, and of course because it's new and everyone's going to jump on that. It's good.
But it's not so new. Do you know what I mean? It's been around for quite.
It's got the same energy.
Now.
It's been, you know, from garage days. It's been around. It reared its head like we did in rave, went back underneath and came out again.
And it has that structure as well, like you were saying about community, about group of people working together, competing with each other a lot. There's a lot of that.
They're the last people selling CDs on a block, still selling a sound. You know, I want to buy this CD, man. It's my team. I'm spitting, man. I'm saying, buy it, man. But a hard copy, selling CDs. And that's a beautiful thing. It's really weird because being around for so long with it, and I'm like, oh God, art. Why it keeps just like a lover that just keeps coming back to me. It's just this relationship I have with the arts. It's like this lover that I can't let go of. And she goes, it's going to be all right. We're going to make love again. And all of a sudden you get romantic again. And it's weird because I'm going through the airport and this guy comes along and this boy says, yeah, gee, uncle, you still making music? Well, yeah, but it's got to be right. If I'm going to make a tune, it's a grime fit. I'm not really in the grime sound. I like the sound. It's got to be right.
Yeah.
I'll play you a tune.
Yes, it's the one.
So
with
he said
Skepta.
to me, Skepta says, gee, I want to make a tune, man. I said, but yeah, if you want to make a tune, it's got to be different. It's got to be different. And in my mind, I'm like, Beck meets Wu-Tang. Yeah, that'd be good. Beck meets Wu-Tang, right. So I said, I got this idea. So I video recorded me in a studio in like a pair of mad Speedos, you know, Thailand, flip-flops. In me flip-flops, I'm like, the lights are on, but there's no one there who's gonna fix this. Like, I'm totally like reliving my punk.
Yeah.
So I sent it to him and he sent like fire emojis back. and then he sends me a picture of a mic stand. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's gonna get on this. And I find myself, yo, you know it's a concept, right? He goes, what do you mean? I said, it's a concept. It's Upstart. He goes, what does Upstart mean? I'm like, winning. Because obviously Upstart, for any of you guys that don't know, is early punks. We were upstarts.
And I'm not sure what, like, if you're not English
just
speakers,
plugged in,
what
by
does
the
that
way.
mean? It's like a sort of, like a rebel. Like.
It's like a rebel. And I said, well, add what lyrics you want to add to that. Add some lyrics. There's my lyrics. There's a shape. And just because I wanted to just go, we're just putting it out on vinyl next month. Just vinyl release. And everyone's going, why are you not putting on an MP3? I'm like, because I don't fucking need to. I sell paintings. Leave me alone.
And how does Skepta feel about that?
Oh, he loves it.
He doesn't mind. So,
I'll play it to you. Can you turn that up, please? Here you go. Go on, get some balls in there. Get it there. There you go.
Yeah, I'm on my own. Macaulay Culkin, home alone. I can't find my spaceship. No escape. Every day I'll be in your face. Better hit the kill switch. I see it in your eye. Don't lie, you're scared to die. You're looking frantic. I heard it's kicking off. Fuck 'em all, I'm switching off. Can't take this fake shit. 'Cause I'm an upstart. I'm feeling uptight. Road trip, gang shit. The streets are ours tonight. You blown a fuse, broke a hammer, lost the screws. I have to fix this.
Shaker, tambourine.
I'm on the edge, monsters underneath the bed. We do the night shift. 'Cause I'm an upstart. And I'm not paranoid. mean turn it down. Say that again, I'ma burn this down. Rest in peace to the man that falls off next. And I ain't scared of the wall of death, cause Satan knows when it comes to judgment day, I'ma trick him up and rip all his clothes, beat him up and take all his holes. Cause I'm an upstart. I'm an upstart. Active boys, I'm not your android. I'm an upstart. Self-made, nothing like you, a free man. Peace.
There you go.
He's still got loads of spunk, the old boy. He's still fighting it. He's still fighting them.
Wow.
He's still out there.
So the old man with a stick.
Will you get away from here?
But you know what? It was great because we're born on the same day, so I understand the younger version of him are very much the same, very similar. But the fact he wanted to do something different. And I think the idea of putting something back in and just going, vinyl only release, see you later, I don't give a bollocks about it. I give it to one guy, Charlie Sloth. He made a record of the week last week. And it's great because he's just like me, just dipping my toe in it and going, it's good to have a little bit of a shakedown with the boys. Because D&B's my love. It will always be in my blood completely. But, you know, doing stuff at 127 and 140, it's always easy for me in that sense. But I like doing it.
Yeah.
Is
Is it easy though? I mean, like.
Yeah, listen, if you give 50 cans to a foundation student of paint,
Yeah.
and you go paint this wall, they're going to be really lost in a sense of style, in terms of graph. But I kind of can paint. You can kind of paint anything when you're graph writer. You can kind of go the other way, and pick it up really quickly.
Yeah.
Now, but don't get me wrong. There are some phenomenal people that can move the other way around, but you tend to pick it up a lot quicker. And I think, you know, when you do melody at 160s, you know, it becomes a hard work. And you can master it. But I also think we spoke about time signatures. I just think that people should really... Electronic music's stuck in this 4/4 thing, man, for some reason. Brazilian music's not. Jazzy's not, certainly. And I think it's time for a new generation to look at time signatures.
Yeah. I would agree, actually.
You know, I mean, 3/4 is a great signature. But of course, you know, you can't play it because you've got to have records that are the same thing. But what if we do 3/4 string arrangement, just the strings, 3/4, but we keep the beats of 4/4? Where are they mathematically going to collide?
And right, so what effect does that give? A kind of slightly destabilizing, slightly weird effect because.
Well, it gives you a whole of the thing. I mean, Ballad Celeste is a good example.
Yeah. Do you want to play that?
Yeah, because at the end of Ballad Celeste, it switches to 3/4.
No restless nights with a headless horse, setting sail for Sleepy Hollow. No feet to breathe as you lay with me. Let go of all your sorrow. I'll be wrapped around you. Treat me as your pillow. Look what here surrounds you. A looking glass of proud blue. No pillow fight on a restless night. Deep down the rabbit just silky sand from a wonderland on time that isn't borrowed. Make your wish your dream, 'cause life ain't what it seems. The hatter comes to tea and Alice sets you free. Oh my eyes, the make-believe. I'll be wrapped around you. Treat me as your pillow. Look what he has surrounds you. A looking glass of proud blue.
Portishead. Portishead. Mandolin. The Maxiphone is called.
Wake to live the dream from a princess sleep. You'll only chase your tail tomorrow, or your ticket's stopped by a cunning fox. There'll be no whispering willow, and I'll be wrapped around you. Treat me as your pillow. Look what he has surrounded you. Looking glass so proud blue.
Strip it back.
But look, the Queen of Hearts to carry you to this. Be careful what you wish, your ghost becomes the myth.
There's that long reverb space. 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Could almost be Chicago trap in that space. Just
Tickling me.
It's my daughter, just always tickling. Thank you. The weird thing about that is that when I get down, I listen to that. It's not about my ego. It's about knowing that that music didn't come from me. It came from conduiting what I was feeling and taking it from just taking it. Just be honest with what you're taking, because this sound is all of ours. It's, you know, and I'm a strong believer in that. I think it's become a bit of a religion for me, music, unfortunately. It's a really good religion, if you like.
Yeah.
Because it's just being open and honest about it. I think it's the most open work I've done. And Natalie, as a player, she's had a really fucked up life, man. You know, but when watching her play music on a piano, so watching a demigod for me. It's like, wow. I'm like, she just plays, and I'm like, okay. And I said to her, I want you to play something, but I want the notes to be broken on the notes. Glang, glang, glang. So you know the difference between a glang and a dun. You know what I mean? And it's how you interpret that language with players, because you both get to this place, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. You can definitely hear that. There's a sort of mixture of this kind of very smooth, very dreamy sound, and then these kind of fragmented.
It's almost like a
fractured things.
fragmented,
They're always in
fractured.
there somewhere
It's
in your.
almost
I
unsafe.
think that's such a big part of all your music, though. Actually, that there's this sense of like these small things happening in a big space. That's one way of probably not very good way of putting
I
it.
always
but,
try and be third party on the sound sometimes, and it's difficult. But I just know that it's part of me, and I think that it's interesting to go through all these different dynamics. I think Redemption, I want to play a piece of it.
Yeah, I would
firstly,
love
we
to,
should-
but I'm
yes.
also thinking I'd really like to do some questions.
Some questions
as
would be
well.
great.
But the track we were just talking about, Redemption, is so great. It's like the kind
Let's
of
go home and listen
just
to
go
it.
and
It's worth,
listen to
it's
it.
worth listening
also,
to.
it's 18 minutes long, so you know.
Well, you know what it was? I do have a 21-minute version, but I didn't want it to be looked at as timeless because it's not. It's a different record.
Right, yeah,
But
yeah.
I have a 21-minute version for me. Just so I know that I could do it. And I think
Yeah.
it was having it as an archetype, that second CD, if you like, those first 4 tracks are like, out there. Any questions? Anyway?
Yeah, I'm sure we've got lots. Hi.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me okay? Hello? Okay, great. Thanks, Goldie. That was really wonderful. You talked about being a control freak, and it was really great, kind of the way that you sort of talked about pre-visualizing everything in your composition. Have you ever considered sort of relinquishing some elements of your production and control to randomness and
Oh yeah.
generative
I do that in the sample process. Like I'll loop stuff. I'll spend like a week making sound and just letting stuff just run its course and just photograph all of it. Within itself, like, I'll have like loops that have just got random stuff going on in them. Redemption is a great example because we've got the modulars going at it. We're just playing with modulars and they're just going, and I'm like, right, just get that. Okay, just put it there. And I want another speed. It's all out of time. Of course, because I think that's the thing about allowing sound to just be in the room and just really be completely random and put you off, make you feel a bit uncomfortable. But I like the idea of the control aspect is for me about arrangement. That's what it's about. For me, I see the arrangement and it can never usually be anything different. And I think relinquishing, Matthew Johnson, great example. He heard Redemption, he said, I have to remix Redemption. He's not remixed the record for a long time. And he said, and his take on it is like, wow, if that's not relinquish, I don't know what is. It's great because his take on Redemption, he's got this whole live band aspect, which he does with his live sound. And I thought, I would never have thought of that. Castaway, Die and Dismantle did this whole mad gutter funk thing, which is like, wow, that is really powerful. I don't mind relinquishing that aspect of it, but as a concept, I think in terms of the process of drums, I like the idea of it being loose and feeling itself. But yeah, I do relinquish within certain long spatial loops to allow it to be something else. Is that answered? More or less, cool. Any other questions?
Hi. I was just wondering, you mentioned synesthesia and in the same sentence as dyslexia and that it was a disability. So I was just wondering what kind of synesthesia you have and if you use it in your creative.
I see the colour like really clearly, and I kind of hear it. If I'm with Ballad Celeste, it was this really orange throb thing that kept happening. It's mad orange, and when the pianos were clanking, usually the basses are always in blues, but the piano had this real blue, pungent smell to it, which is weird, and.
Smell as well, all the different senses.
Yeah,
mixed up
they all
there,
mixed up because it was a classical piece that I was making, and it had these 14th century monks in it, believe it or not. The original piece of the backing track had this other thing that I'd had, and I just couldn't put it together. And I don't like having unfinished work. And I took these blues and hammered them with this orange, and it wasn't supposed to work. But as soon as her vocal was implemented, it just calmed both colours down, if that makes any sense. And I kind of like the process of seeing it is something sometimes I wish I couldn't see it, like because I can't get away from it. And there's the only example I could give you is a thing called Portrait. I never played demos to people, okay, but hopefully I can play this demo because it's kind of like, what would it sound like if you're trying to make a record? If you're trying to make a song, record's the wrong word, trying to make a song and the song's trying to make itself and then it kind of realizes itself, and then it creates an idea. It's called landscape, and it turns into a thing called portrait. And on the subjective thing, it's in two halves, landscape being one track, portrait being the other. But that's the only way I can explain it. I do see it very clearly in smell and vision. Any other questions?
It's incredible to hear your music and how it's changed since you started out. You're famous for kind of really utilizing samplers when you started out. Do you feel that the changes in technology that have come along have helped or hindered your creative process?
Thank you.
I've always had this thing when we were using Logic with Jim when he first started, and James Davison, just for the record, is probably the greatest engineer I've ever worked with, because they're the new breed. I think most guys that we're doing D&B, they're really, really meticulous in software and hardware, and it's very hard to have that quality of a guy that does a lot of outboard in that way as well, very strong because he builds modulars. And he'd play me all these things that he couldn't finish. And seeing the way, like, there's a track called Fear Heaven. When Ableton first came out, I did Fear Heaven on this piece. And the guy, Tech Itch, was the engineer. And he was saying to me, this is how it works. You can put it all in. I'm like, what? And it all works? What do you mean it all works? In time. And it was almost like, for me, it kind of freaked me out. I've seen technology change because I was watching Creator in black and white, going vertically. For the very beginning. And I chose to be over the shoulder of some guy going, T, 16 bars in, can we take that down? Can we just clone that and put it on track 4 with that reverb down? Ghost of reverb, fade the reverb up, halfway down the 8 bar, reverse it and fade it out the other way.
Yeah, so you learned that
and he'd be like,
language, yeah.
Care? So it's also about having a respect and a rapport with engineers, because I'm a very complicated person, but that's the way that I like to have gone through the process of making music, because it gets us to this whole other place, man.
I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to finish.
Okay, see you later.
See ya. No, come back.
I'll leave it on this. I'll leave it on this. I'm really overwhelmed with the response today. I didn't think it was going to be like this. I came from Thailand last night, missed the connecting flight, stayed in a really shitty hotel, woke up at 3:30 going, oh God, I've got to get on this plane. And got here, and it's been amazing. And I want to say that I've been so blessed to have people that have even bothered listening to my music, and I've been blessed to work with some phenomenal musicians. I couldn't do anything without engineers helping me realize my dreams. I couldn't. And no man is an island, remember that. But always remember this, that a truthful idea will last in the honesty of time. Done.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you.